every one of the requests that come through. And so I think it's important that, as Jeannine said, you make a case, make sure that we understand your mission, make sure we understand how your programs and your projects relate to your mission, and then make sure that you are accurately sharing the impact that your program will have in the community. I know a lot of we have a board that does a good chunk of our reviews. So as long as they understand all of that and understand the impact that you have, um, I just think it's important for you to remember that as you build your case.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kim. And John, you work more with sponsorships and other corporate entities as well. So what thoughts do you have on this topic?
Yeah, and for me specifically, I work every day in corporate partnerships, sponsorships, and foundation relationships. And often I think those of us who do that work in the development side, we're often told by other development folks that our work is transactional and that a lot of what we do is just, oh, you go to a business, you get your gift, you're done. And that's the thing that I think is the biggest misconception about what we do, is that our work is transactional, because people like to forget that we are working with people at these businesses. We're working with people at these foundations. And when we develop larger, more meaningful relationships with them and we are able to work together, that impact starts to grow. And, when you see those big business names as sponsors for events for an organization, or you see a organization getting a large gift from a foundation while you're still struggling, the thing to remember there isn't that they got lucky on that gift. It's that they worked a relationship with the people who are working at those businesses or at those foundations, and developing a path towards mission alignment to make sure that those gifts are able to be sustainable year after year after year. And the biggest example that I can give of that, for my organization in particular, is we're on about year 15, 16 of a partnership with the Home Depot Foundation. And we work gifts from that to our national office, but also there's a large relationship there that allows all of our affiliate offices across the country to earn gifts from the Home Depot Foundation as well. And that didn't just happen in year one, and it didn't just happen in year two, but over time is how that relationship developed. And the hands at the Home Depot Foundation have changed several times in all of that. And it's a testament to our relationship building to continue that relationship as hands have changed as well. So those are just some things to keep in mind.
Absolutely. And as all of you were speaking, I keep thinking back to the statistic of, and I don't know if this is still true, but that the average development officer stays in their role approximately 18 months. And so we can maybe talk about the ramifications of that and where we see that going. But of course, building the relationships takes a lot of time. So these are all excellent insights. Let's go on to our next question is, what typically motivates decision makers in foundations, corporations, and individual giving? And we'll start with Kim, because she is kind of in that room.
And I want to, before we answer that question, I do want to just say something based on what you said about that last question. You talked about the tenure of fundraisers and their roles, and I think it's important too that as you move along into different roles or different positions, different companies, whatever you want to call it, to still maintain those relationships. And I'm going to pick on somebody. I'm going to pick on Renee. I think you may have known this was coming. Renee started out with an organization, and I knew her through that organization. She has since moved on to a different organization, to a different job. And she was quick to reach out and share their story. Even though we did have a history with them, she made sure that she kind of maintained that personal relationship with us. So I can appreciate that. And it kind of helps as well, when you're seeking funding, to just make sure that you keep that personal connection as well. So sorry, I forgot your next question though.
That's okay. That's a great insight, Kim. Thank you. What motivates the decision making? And I think you alluded to this the first time, but maybe tell us a little more.
Yeah, so it's actually hard, especially in the corporate space. As I mentioned, we have a board. Our board members are not external, they're internal employees. So a lot of them aren't 100% familiar with how foundations operate, the whole giving cycle, all that. So it's my job and my supervisor's job to educate them just on that piece alone. And then when the requests come in, um, we have to make sure that they understand the why of giving. So, why are we doing this? We're not doing this just because it looks good. We're doing this because we really want to make an impact in the community. So, we want to make sure that they're there. But I think some of the things just in conversation that really tug at their heartstrings are those things that they have been impacted by. So there's some things that, oh, my daughter had to deal with this in her school, or, whatever the case is. If it's something that they've had to deal with, they tend to be more, or that they're familiar with, they tend to be more supportive. They also tend to be more supportive of things that kind of match the company's goals and mission as well. So we want to make sure that, yes, we want to give, we want to do good in the community, but we also want to make sure that we're sticking true to what we want to do, or what our mission is as an organization, and what our goals are as an organization. Um, Sometimes there's even a little bit of social influence in there. So and so said this looks good, and so and so is supporting this. So I don't want to be the mean guy, or the guy not saying no all the time. So I mean, although it sounds silly, that it's reality. So that's what I tend to deal with on the corporate side quite a bit.
Yeah, I think you said something really interesting there, which was educating your board on the
Hmm.
why. And
Yeah.
Jeannine and John, I'm sure you can speak to that in your roles. Jeannine, how do you go about educating potential funders on the why of what you do?
That's a really good question. I think it's twofold in the sense that you really want to let them know that you're going to be sustainable. They're not meeting your budget every year, and without them, you can't do this. They want to see that you're mature, that you can do this on your own, that there's other places you're getting funding as well, that you're going to be sustainable. And maybe with them, with the amount they give, you can help an extra 50 people, but they know that nothing is dependent on just their funds. I think that's an important, and having a plan for success, and explaining what that plan for success is. And one of the real important things I found as the board president of the marathon and founding the marathon and working with our board and working with the team there. And then my prior job, where I was retired from Stewart's Carrying Place, and I was there for 14, 15 years, and I was on the board first. So I was more employed there, where now I'm, you know, just a board member. Uh, so it's kind of twofold, that there's two totally different nonprofits, right? People go, oh, it's about giving to people who have had cancer at Stewart's. And, I was really dependent on explaining what our mission was there and how many people we could help. I go to talk to people about the marathon, and they go, runners? Oh, I don't run. What do you mean? That doesn't really mean so much to me. It's a nice thing. It's great for the community, but people are running. Okay. And I have to explain that it's changed people's lives. We're promoting health and fitness. We're galvanizing the community. We're doing things in the schools, and for kids who can't afford to pay. We do scholarships. Um, People have gotten healthy that were sick, and we're really get bringing the community together for a cause. So I think once you can get in front of people and explain, but the most important part, I think, of anything that I've done with development, or being a CEO of a nonprofit, or being involved with the marathon like I am, is my team. I depended a lot on my staff at Stewart's. I depended a lot on the board and staff at the marathon, that you're a team and you work together. I can't tell the story myself, and John can probably speak to this. The way we would market and get the information out there and share and be positive. And I depend on the teams and the staff to give me the statistics I need and keep track of all the information I need to make sure the grants are written properly, or the funding is getting out there and getting in front of people, and they have the right information to feel comfortable to trust us and to build those relationships. A long-winded answer.
No, thank you, Jeannine. That's great. And John, she kind of passed the ball to you there, talking about maybe some storytelling and getting buy-in from your team. Do you have any other thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I wrote some notes down on this question, and like how to explain your why is really going to be showing your impact in the corporate and foundation space. And when I say showing your impact, a lot of times for smaller organizations, they feel like, oh, well, we don't have the same amount of impact that a larger organization does, so we're going to sit this one out, or things along those lines. And what my piece of advice there is, by explaining the size of your organization as you initiate that relationship, that's also going to then correspond to what your impact looks like. And no one expects an organization that's serving, let's say, 500 people to have the same impact as an organization that's serving 2 million people or 2 million clients, what have you. So I think by being able to explain what your organization does, how it does it, and show what impact it has on the community that you're serving, even if that impact might seem small or insufficient to you, to what could be a very large organization, you don't necessarily know what they're looking for, what type of impact that might look like. And when they scale that down to your organization size, that really changes the type of relationship that you're going to begin to build with that corporation or with that foundation.
Fantastic. Yeah. Very, very good point, John. And I think we have organizations of every size represented here today. So that can absolutely speak to all of us. This next question is one that I am excited to ask, but I would hate to answer, so I don't envy you guys. Do you find that emotion or logic play a different role in different funding streams? So think about the different funding streams that you've worked in and whether or not you think logic or emotion wins out. Or I have a feeling you'll tell us it might be a little bit of both. Let's start with Jeannine, because I haven't started. Well, I think I have started. Go ahead, Jeannine. I'll pick
That's
on you
okay.
first.
That's fine. And I think it's both. I think it's on an individual basis, and it depends what it's about. So emotion plays out a lot when you're meeting with donors, because you have this strong mission and you're proud of what you're doing, and they're going to give because they believe in you. But I may go to a corporation that they don't really know what I'm about. That's not so important to them, but they know logically, and it's very logical, that if you do this sponsorship, your name's going to get out there on 500 different areas. And that's more important to them, that they get their company or name out there. So it's just a, logical way to get funds.
So know your audience. Kim, do you have
Yes.
any thoughts on that and your role?
Sure, I would agree. It's a little bit of both. It's really a hard question to answer because of the fact that it is a little bit of both. It's individual. Each person is different. And again, I'm going to keep referring to our board at Synthomer. And Jeannine, you kind of made a good point about what's important to businesses, because we'll go in and we'll review requests, and some of our board members will ask, well, what do we get? Like, what do we get out of it? And then there's me and a couple others that could care less what we get out of it. I don't care that our name is on, a billboard or on a sign or whatever it is. So it's always kind of hard to navigate that space because emotions do exist, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we're going to have results. Like everything is result oriented. And, as a company, we're data driven. We need to see numbers. We need to know all this. But at the same time, in the back of your head, you're like, oh my gosh, I want to support this, that, or the other. So it's a mixture. I'm not sure that I have a right answer. I don't know that there is a right answer, but it's just a mix.
Sure, sure. John, any insights from your experience on logic versus emotion?
Yeah, Kim, I don't think that there's a right answer here either, but I am a bit of the same way as both Kim and Jeannine, that both of these things play a part. I do, however, think that emotion can help open the door, but logic is what's going to continue your relationship, and it's what's going to close a deal more often than not. And when I say emotion can open the door, what I mean there is an impact story or a statement or a client profile might open the door because you're going to start pulling on some heartstrings. And we all have an idea of some of that donor psych things that we've talked about in the past and how that plays an important role in what we do. But logically speaking, on the corporate and foundation side of giving, you're then, once that door is open, you're taking a look at what that organization's priorities are what they fund. So whether that's a corporation or a foundation, they have priorities that they're looking to fund. And those oftentimes change from year to year. They can change every few years. But logically, if you can fit into one of those boxes, you then have to figure out how you're going to create a proposal, create a case for support, whatever it might be, to explain how that emotion ties into what their funding priorities are and why they should be continuing to fund you or fund you in the first place. So a lot of that then comes down to project management skills and being able to explain step by step or logically why you deserve that funding or you should win that funding from the corporation or from the foundation.
Yes, thanks, John. Let's jump back into the relationship building part of it. And maybe each of you can talk a little bit about what a strong relationship will look like. How can you feel confident in that relationship before you go ahead and make an ask? And let's ping back to John again.
Yeah, no problem. So I took some notes on this question as well, because this is where things get very dicey in that corporate foundation space and why we think a lot of it's transactional, because a lot of us move on after that first gift and we don't really think about why we went there in the first place. And the first thing that I do when I'm researching a business or I'm researching a foundation is I take a look at our mission alignment. So my mission alignment to their mission alignment, if that's a foundation, so nonprofit to the foundation's mission alignment, or nonprofit to a corporation's CSR policies. So those are the places where I'm looking for alignment. Does it make sense? And from there, that's where the relationship really starts to build. And a lot of times, we go after these corporations or we go after foundations looking for funding immediately, but we don't really necessarily start a relationship. On the foundation side of things, I can understand that. Usually it's going to be you've submitted a request for funding, then a relationship starts. But on the corporate side of things, I would share that starting with like an employee engagement event versus immediately asking for funding is a great way to develop a relationship, showcase your organization, and then continue on that relationship and see what happens in the future. From a foundation side, I said, again, usually you're going to apply for funding, receive that funding, and then a relationship starts to develop. And I think you maintain that relationship by staying on top of your reporting. If you did not receive funding, if they're willing to give you feedback, take that feedback and use it in the future. There are multiple steps there, but really the relationship is going to begin in that mission alignment moment and making sure that your organization and the organization you're seeking funding from ultimately align in some way, shape, or form from the get-go before you've even started anything else.
Yeah, that's really great. Kim, I want to pick on you for a second. That that initial moment, that initial moment that an organization reaches out to you, what does that typically look like for you at Synthomer Foundation? And do you invite, are you reaching out? Are they reaching in? Is it a little bit of both?
No, so we don't reach out. It's literally everybody reaching in, which makes it a little bit difficult because we are a small team. So it tends to be phone calls, emails, all of the things. And I sometimes feel bad because I can't get back with everybody right away because when I say a small team, there's literally two of us. And so we have two individuals, but we have 10 communities throughout the US. So we're trying to navigate that with our time. So I can't always get back with people, but as far as what the initial ask looks like, it's typically, can we sit down for a phone call? If it's local, can we come out and see a space or see what we're working on? Or sometimes I've attached a project or proposal to this email. And, that's great. But again, we don't always have time to look at everything ahead of time. We often get calls about a project, and then the next question is, so do you think that you'll do you think that you'll fund this? And I don't know. I can't answer that. That's not a question that I can readily answer. So I almost always say, go ahead and submit. We have an online portal that everyone should submit their requests in. So I always tell people, go ahead, submit online, and we'll review it. I know it sounds like it's my blanket answer, but it's the truth. I can't answer that question right away. But as far as the relationships go, I think that John hit the nail on the head when he said that the initial relationship doesn't have to start with just the ask, especially in the corporate space. And I also tell grantees that quite often. We do, because I manage our employee engagement. One of my goals is to try to get our employees out into the community as much as possible. So I'll almost always ask, are there ways that I can get them involved in your organization? And yes, no, maybe so. But if we can make that happen, 9 times out of 10, we're going to support that organization down the road because we've had some involvement with them. So I think that's really important. The follow-up, the reporting, all that is important too. But I think in the beginning, just having that connection through not just the ask, but through other forms of relationships as well, like as far as the volunteering and things of that nature, or board service even.
Yeah, and Kim, I will add to that. The one thing that I have found more often than not is that
Mhm.
organizations, corporate type organizations, when you do employee engagement, if you can offer a way for their employees to use the skills that they use at work. So an example of
Yeah.
this would be like
Yeah.
if you're trying to seek funding from an accounting firm, if you have like some type of project, like a cost benefit study or something that you want done for your organization, that's a really good way to engage those individuals because that's work that they already do, they're passionate about, that's what they know, and that's something that a
Mhm.
corporation would want to put their name on because it's promoting the work that they already do as a corporation.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
Good
I'm
point.
gonna I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that Jeannine, there might be a somewhat creative way that you do employee engagement, maybe with the marathon. Is that true?
Yes, yes. As far as the question, and I think John hit it on the head, and so did Kim, and just explaining the differences of how to ask and how to give. I think it's really important. It is okay to not get funding from someone. It is okay to start that relationship in advance. And I think Kim probably feels just as bad when she gets an ask that says, "Oh, this is they spend hours on this, and there's no way we can even fund this. And I found that some of those relationships, just cold calling and thinking, I think that's what this is about, giving. I think this is what I could ask for, but I'm not sure. Don't spend hours on it. Pick up the phone. Say, listen, I'm just checking to see, this is who I am. This is what we do. And oftentimes they'll say, well, we can't give to that, but if you write this, that would be something we'd be able to look at. And starting those relationships in advance of even asking and kind of getting to know them, because they feel just as bad. They don't want you to spend the time on it if they can't give, and you don't want to put all that time in when you can be focusing on something else. So those beginning relationships are important. And we often, at the marathon, we often get people who are part of the marathon and volunteer, and then they become on the board, and then they become part of the marathon that way. And one example I can tell you from when I was the CEO at Stewart's Caring Place is, for example, I would work with people at Goodyear, who were experts in their field. And we had something with our computers. Well, their staff would, one of their employees would volunteer, come in and volunteer to help us with that project. So that's the other side of it that Kim and John were talking about. That's so important, that they don't always give monetarily, but they can give with their expertise. And boy, it saves you a lot of money when they can come in and help with that, and you're not paying an outside company to do it with those kinds of projects.
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and ask a question from the chat, and please feel free to put your questions in the chat. We will pause at like quarter till and really open it up. But since Sue has a question in the chat, we'll go ahead and jump on that. Do your boards or leadership understand how important the relationship is, and that it is not just an ask for funding? And I want to start by saying, Jeannine mentioned that you may not always get funding, but it makes you said it more eloquently about how the relationship is just as important as funding. And I want that stitched on a pillow and put in some of our board members' offices. But what are your thoughts? Let's start with Kim.
Absolutely. I think it goes back to what we said, in that that's how the relationship can start, is through volunteerism, or we get it's funny because we get a lot of phone calls. Can we meet for lunch? And I know what that means. I'm like, okay. So I know exactly what that means. But all jokes aside, ultimately you want money, right? You need dollars, you want dollars, you need dollars to operate, you need dollars to run programs. But I think it is important to make sure that your boards are aware that some of these programs can potentially run without certain funding. So as Jeannine mentioned, maybe some volunteers can come in and do certain things and volunteer to help run these programs, when the dollars don't necessarily become available. So I think it is important to make sure that the board members are aware of that. Not sure that they all are, because again, green, and I'm not saying that green is not important, because it is. We all need dollars. But I think that if you can educate them and teach them the various ways that relationships can work with funders, then I think your programs will still be successful, or can still be successful.
Sure. And Jeannine, you've kind of been on both sides. You're currently the board president. Have you had success in instilling that belief in others?
Yes, I think for the marathon, our board members are very involved. We the staff relies on us a lot to make introductions to people in the community, and maybe get their companies, our companies, as a board member, involved, and say, hey, wouldn't the so and so company, we need 15 people to do this water station, and and bring them in to be a part of it. And it's nice because it really gets people involved in what we're doing, and more people learn about it and know that We're not just putting on a race one day and putting everybody out there. And it's a year-round project. So we're in front of people all the time. Um, uh, and and getting that kind of information and getting them involved in certain parts of what we do.
Sure. John, any thoughts? I mean, obviously your whole role is relationship building, so hopefully your board sees the value in that.
Yeah, so I mean, from my perspective, I'm very lucky to work in an organization where both our leadership and our board understands both of these things. But I also know that not everyone is that lucky all of the time. And one of the things that I have learned personally over the years is when you're in an organization where you have leadership or a board that doesn't understand those things, education is going to be your number one thing to those people nonstop. And when I say nonstop, I mean as soon as you introduce a new prospect, you need to explain your timeline on the relationship and what your end goal is. Like, even if that's a 2, 3 year goal down the road, because you realize based on the conversations that you're having with the potential prospect, you need to share that from the beginning. Because if you share a brand new prospect without that timeline of how long this is really going to take, people are never going to learn. And that includes your board members, that includes your leadership. And good, bad, or ugly, we all wish that our leaders maybe understood that better, probably because they've done this before for those of us that work in the nonprofit sector. But our leaders are also getting pressure from board members. And oftentimes, like I'm blessed to work in a national office, in a national office setting now. But I have worked local, and oftentimes those local board members, this could potentially be their first time on a board, and they're placing pressure on your leader because they see results to only work in the same way that their private corporation does or the private sector does. And we all know that's not necessarily how the nonprofit sector works. And sometimes we can work a major gift for over a year, sometimes 2 years before that solidifies and becomes a reality, and it's something we can recognize. And I think education to your leadership and to your board about what your process is on a specific prospect will go a long way in making sure that your boards and leadership are not only supportive, but they understand. And when they understand, that's when their support starts to increase more and more and more, because they can track your milestones with you as you develop that relationship. So explaining those things, education is always going to be the number one thing for me, because that allows me more latitude to do the necessary work to ultimately end up with a gift at the end of whatever that timeline looks like.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. I wish we all had more time to do all of that. I'm thinking about, okay, what am I going to bring to my next board meeting? But that's a great point. Um, let's get, because we're getting a little bit towards where we might open it up to questions. So I want to jump into some practical takeaways. I think we have maybe some newer fundraisers in the group. And what advice would you give to a newer fundraiser who is starting to dip their toes into major donor acquisition or foundational giving or corporate partners? Is there a little bit of advice that you could give to those newer people? Let's start with John.
Yeah, my biggest piece of advice on you might feel intimidated, don't be. Don't be intimidated, because there's nothing to be intimidated about. What you're doing here is not any different than any of your regular everyday work and development. Our individual giving is all about relationships, just like our corporate and foundation giving is all about relationships. And Kim made a really good comment in her answer on the last question of, I get asked to lunch a lot, and I know exactly what that means. These corporations, these foundations, they know by looking at the title of what you do for your organization, they know why you're contacting them. And they sit through meetings like this very often. So your intimidation is really just your own. And it's something that you need to work through on your own before that meeting has even happened. So whether that's journaling or taking some time to calm yourself down or what have you, this is where general like mental health practices will just help you greatly, because reflect on what you're doing, explain your why to yourself, and come up with a game plan. And when you have that game plan, account for things that might go wrong, and don't be intimidated by it. If you've planned and prepared for yourself, these people work with other individuals every single day. They have other partnerships. This likely is not their first time working with a nonprofit, and being able to just explain plainly why it is you're doing what you're doing and why funding is crucial is going to go a long way. And again, being intimidated by it is really just your own biases there, and you just need to get past those, because these are things that are very normal for them. So the piece of advice that I got when I first started working in development was, you can't be afraid to ask for money, and you can't be afraid of the getting the answer that is no. And once you get beyond those two things, your fear and hearing the word no, it's all smooth sailing from there. You get used to it, and you roll with the punches, and you take what you get, and you figure out ways to get more.
Very true, John. Very well said. Kim, can you confirm that you're a nice person and just a normal everyday human that people should feel
I
free
am
to approach?
absolutely a nice person. Don't I know quite a few people on here. Hopefully you agree.
I'm
But
sure they
yes.
do. That's why I asked.
Um, I would, though, agree with John. I mean, just get past your fears. He mentioned having a game plan. Yes, have your game plan, but make sure that you know your game plan in and out. Make sure that another thing that you said, John, you said explain plainly. That's very important to individuals in my space. Um, I don't need 12 pages. Just short and concise about your ask and your why. Um, I think that one thing that I will add, though, is that to remember your mission. We get a lot of individuals that contact us and say, well, what is it that you're looking for? What is it that you want? And it's not about what we're looking for. What do you need and what will be beneficial to this community? So you always have to lead with that as a new professional. Remember that. This is not about what we want. It's about what will benefit this community and what makes sense for your organization. So I tell people that often, especially newer professionals, to come in with that. And that's all I have.
Fantastic. And Jeannine, you were telling me a little bit about when you started the marathon and put yourself back in those shoes. What was that like, and what can you offer to our younger fundraisers here?
I think the biggest thing I can offer is you be humble. You don't have to come across like you're the smartest person in the world, even though in fear you want to be confident. Um, be humble and be confident and be transparent. Sometimes I often find that uh, people give money for many reasons, but the more you can educate them and be transparent and follow through and take the hard questions. For example, when I used to I meet with a funder and I'd be like, and I'd explain it on, they go, well, I don't want to give to overhead. I'm not giving to overhead. I'll give to the program or I'll give to this or that, but I don't want it going to overhead. And I say, tell me what that might be. Explain to me, what you feel overhead is. Cause I'm like, I should be wearing a shirt that says I'm overhead. Cause as far as I know, we cannot get this done without the building, the people, the expertise. And oftentimes, and people are being educated and they're getting past that, is thinking that everybody nonprofit wants to work for $8 an hour. And so wouldn't that be nice? But then they get burnt out and then they move on and then we're back to square one. So I think educating your donors and understanding your mission and going in with confidence, but being humble and answering the hard questions. And you'd be surprised how much they relate to that and then they get it, you know. You have to pay people what they're worth. You have to run it like a business. You need to spend money to make money, you know. Um, and they need to know what it's going for. And I think that's the most important advice I could give new people is you'll be okay. And the no's are a good learning experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Jeannine, I think you brought up something else, the asking questions part, right? I think we go into these meetings sometimes and really so gung ho and telling people how awesome we are and this is what we want to do. But asking questions can be just as important. Does everybody think so?
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any questions from the audience as we go through? And you can feel free to just raise your hand or type it in the chat. We've got these amazing experts here, and don't waste the opportunity to pick their brains. And Jen and Sue, if you see somebody with a hand raised, let me know.
If we don't get any questions, Tiffany, I'd like to answer question 9 off the list. So
Sure.
we can let it go for a minute, though.
Well, why don't you answer it while people are thinking?
Yeah,
I will
so
read question 9, which was, what is one, I love these kinds at the end. What is one people first practice every organization should adopt regardless of its fundraising strategy? Go ahead.
yeah, be open to criticism. Be open to criticism about your organization, about the way that you asked, about your proposal, about your letter of intent, about whatever it is. Whether that criticism is good, bad, or ugly, be open to it because ultimately that will shape your further journey with this organization that you are seeking funding from. Because what they're telling you is, we like you, but these are things that we don't necessarily agree with. We don't see the alignment here, this, that, whatever it is. Be open to that criticism. Go back to your organization, say, here's the situation, here's the feedback that we got, and game plan on how to improve or change your messaging if you don't have to change your programming, how you change your messaging to fit better. And don't ever take that criticism as, I'm terrible or I didn't do a good job or what have you. It's so easy to internalize that and bring yourself down and just allow yourself to not be successful. But that criticism is ultimately what will shape you in the future and make you a better fundraiser from that point forward.
Excellent, John. Thank you. Jeannine or Kim, do you have a people first practice that every organization can adopt?
I think that for me, one of the big things that has always been important to me is handwritten notes. I mean, I love getting them if they're nice. Um, and I love writing them. And it's a way to really stay in touch with my donors. Um, for the marathon, when we're doing projects, I want to thank everyone. And maybe it's a letter that goes out or, a receipt or, something to show that their letter for their taxes or that they gave money. And I love to say, thanks so much because I can't be with them as much as I'd like to. I'd like to be with all of them all day, every day. But you can't do that. There's time management. And I feel like handwritten notes are so important because it lets them know you're thinking about them, that they're an individual or a company and they're important. And then it sets it up to continue that relationship with follow through. And then when you need them again, they're going to be there.
Love that. Personal touches. Very important.
And I would agree with the personal, actually all of that, but the personal touches really do make a difference. Um, and, again, we always get the invitations and those things, they don't matter to me. I mean, but I may be an anomaly, for some people they do, but for me, they don't. I think the personal touches truly do matter and make a difference for some individuals in this space. So I would agree with Jeannine.
Well, to wrap this up, if we don't have any questions, we had the idea to start with this graphic, and I completely forgot. So I'm going to share my screen if I can figure out how. Doing it? Can you all see my screen? This is a graphic from Giving USA, and it breaks down where is the giving coming from and also where is it going. And as we can see, 66% is coming from individuals. That actually increased from 2023. 19% coming from foundations, bequests, and then giving by corporations is actually one of the smallest ones. Sorry, John. I mean, you must work really hard. Yes. I will absolutely share that image. It is a PDF and I can't figure out how to put it in the chat, but I will have our chapter administrator, Jennifer, send it out to the group when we send out the recording. And Sue, you have something?
Yeah, I love this document. You can get it for free off of Giving USA. You do have to give them your email. It's always running a year behind because it's like taxes. But I would argue that it's not 66% that come from individuals, but that it's 100% because individuals just means their personal giving. Foundations are run by individuals. Bequests come from individuals upon their death, and corporations are run from individuals. So again, at the end of the day, I know that we have a lot of tools, a lot of responsibilities, a lot of expectations. I would just suggest maybe try to automate the things that aren't people forward facing, so that you can use that information to establish super strong personal relationships, because I personally think that's what's missing. Like Kim said, the invites are nice, and those type of things. But if you're invited and you've never been talked to in between, I feel like, is that just a mailing list label? So just a thought.
Right. We did have one more question pop up from Abby. What is the best way to be introduced to existing donors when you're a new fundraiser on your team and your ED has primarily held the relationship? So either any of you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I can start off on like what my route would be. Abby, great question. I'd say right now you're very lucky that your executive director is on the team and the person who held those relationships is there. So my first initial route there would be do an individual email introduction to the people that you're looking to meet. So pick which sponsors, which foundations, or which companies you're looking to meet, and have your executive director send an email saying, hi, I want to introduce you to a new member of my team. Her name's Abby. She's going to be taking over a lot of the contact between ABC Company and DEF nonprofit, and work it that way. And once that introduction is made, when you have the opportunity to reach out, make sure you do your own introduction as well. And if you're when it comes time for a sponsorship or an employee engagement event, if they're not responding to you, go back to your executive director and be like, hey, I'm not getting a response. Could you ask for an in-person meeting or something like that? And then keep developing that relationship, because the thing you have to remember is, yeah, things are changing hands, but you're lucky to have the person who owns that relationship still in your back pocket. So use that when you need to. Now, let's take it a step further, and let's say your executive director is gone. There is no more person who's having a relationship there. You do your best, and you do the outreach exactly the same way that you normally would. But at that same time, I want you to take a minute and take a step back. Take a look at your board members, people who volunteer for your organization, other people who've been engaged with your organization, their donors, and look at, is there any relationships with those companies, those sponsors that you're no longer hearing from because the relationship has changed? And is there somebody that's already inside of your organization who can remake that introduction to you, not necessarily to the organization, but make an introduction to you, for you, what have you? So you have routes there to ensure that there's continuity in what had already been doing. And right now you're very lucky because your executive director is still with the organization.
And I'd like to also just say, don't be afraid just to send an email on your own. I've gotten quite a few of those as well. Hi, I'm so and so. I work for this organization. XYZ had this position previously or handled this role previously. I just got hired on this day, all the things. So don't be afraid just to go ahead and send an email yourself as well.
Yeah, I agree. Those are all great ideas. I think too, with your onboarding in the organization, what are those goals for the agency? Um, is the team expecting you to not touch these donors because they have them? Is the team expecting you to bring in new donors? Is the team expecting a way for you to introduce yourself to them? It may be worth a deeper conversation to find out what the plan might be for your role, so that you can begin to take it upon yourself to do what the team is looking at, and reach out to them and find a way to get in front of them. Like we said, with maybe a phone call or a letter, or again, a handwritten note, or I just want to introduce myself. What's the plan for your organization around getting you in front of their donors?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
And we had one more question coming in, but I think unfortunately we are up against the 1 o'clock deadline. What I want to do is I invite Aubrey to stay on, and if any of our panelists want to stay on, they can do that. The question is about kind of reacquiring a donor who had a negative experience with your organization, and how do you rebuild that trust? And I will say, Aubrey, that in itself is a whole topic that we could probably all talk on at another PD. But if you want to stay on, and if any of the panelists want to stay on and discuss that, we can. But I'm going to turn it over to Sue to go ahead and kind of sign us off, and thank everyone for coming, and especially to our panelists for being involved.
Yeah, thank you so much for all attending. This was great. It's a great way to start off. So excited that we had 10 of you that are not members. So hopefully you're finding value, and we'd love to make you members so that we can get you involved, engaged, and learn more about what you'd like to hear about or what you'd like to learn about. Wanted to remind you that February is also a virtual PD because we're so super smart, and not sure what the weather's going to bring us. And that is going to be on Thursday, February 19th. And we're going to learn how to get the most from our CRM. And we have a data strategist. His name is Matt Galata, who's going to join us. I want to thank Catherine for facilitating that. So thank you very much. So keep a lookout, guys. Again, give us ideas. But thank you to Tiffany, John, and the whole team for there. And sending you good vibes for the rest of the week.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Stay
you.
warm. Except Jeannine, keep it warm. Send the breezes
Okay.
this
I'll
direction.
send it up
Turn the
north.
fan. Yeah, turn
Yeah.
the.
Okay.
Let's see. Is Aubrey still on here?
I am still here. I can't figure out how to turn my camera back on.
That's okay, no worries. I will say that like reacquiring a donor can be very tricky. And if any of our panelists want to jump in and speak to that, please do.
So for us, as a corporate foundation, I would say that transparency is key. You just have to be transparent with all things, honestly, but especially in this situation, we understand what happened. This is what we've done to rectify the problem. This is what's different. Make sure that you're sharing all of that information. I mean, we were in somewhat of a similar situation maybe about 2 years ago, where we cut funding to an organization for some things that had happened. and they did get new leadership, actually. So new leadership came in, they did reach out to us and did just that. Shared what has changed. They acknowledged what happened. So I think that's important too. They didn't kind of ignore the fact that this situation or this thing had been going on, but they acknowledged it, shared what they've done to change it, shared the position that they are in now and what their plan is moving forward. And we did start a new relationship with them. We aren't quite where we were before as far as dollars go, but we are slowly, working with them. So I think that's important. Transparency is key.
Right.
Yeah, Kim, you hit the nail on the head with that one. That was exactly where I was going to go as well, was be as transparent as possible. And sometimes the only thing I'll add there is sometimes you have to tell the dirty parts of the story, and be as judicious as you can about that without making your organization look terrible. But you have to tell the
Right.
dirty parts about what happened, and you have to tell the truth about them. And be as honest about that as you can without being disparaging to yourself or to others who may have left the organization, but be as honest at the same time as you possibly can be, because that honesty is going to go a lot further than you might realize.
Right. That's
Yes,
tough
you
too,
know,
because there was an NDA signed, so
Mm.
there was a lot of stuff that happened, and leadership had changed hands, and I think that the current leadership is that they've been very transparent. It's just, I don't know if it's something that just takes time, or is there like an extra step beyond that, just maintaining the relationship, or
Maintain the relationship. I think we'll all agree. Maintain the relationship as best as you can. If that means you're taking this donor or someone from a corporation out to lunch once a year just to catch up, then you're doing that. But maintain that relationship, because the rest of it starts to fall back into place once they see that the changes you've said have happened actually have happened, and they'll start to trust. There'll be some trust that starts to happen beyond that. So I think you're doing all the right things. You just needed to hear it from somebody else to tell you were doing all the right things.
yeah.
Yes, I agree 100%. I think that the transparency and continuing to follow through with having a relationship with them, even if it has nothing to do with your agency,
Mhm.
just to try to be on good terms with them, that I understand you're upset. I understand the reasons. I understand it didn't work out. I can't speak a whole lot about it because, I can't, but I want you to know that I want to continue, you know, our relationship no matter what, because they're important to you besides what they give to you. And that way, if you can keep that positive or some kind of a relationship, that they're not as apt to go out in the community and complain. Like they'll understand there were changing things, but I still have some kind of a relationship. And then, because it leaves that kind of hole in your heart when things like this happen. Like, who did this? How did it happen? Where did it go wrong? And whether, no matter whose fault it was or how it happened, knowing that you have that understanding that they're important to you as a person and an individual, or a company is good for them to know.
Right.
And Aubrey,
Absolutely.
this could be a good opportunity too for you to see if there are ways that their employees could come out and do some sort of volunteer work or kind of get bodies from your potential funder into your space. And then you have actual eyes on what it is that you're doing, and they can see, okay, they have really made a turnaround. And, you have some voices there that can vouch for that. So it could be if you go back to what we said earlier in our conversation today, you don't necessarily have to start the relationship with funds, with asking for funds, but start with maybe volunteerism and getting some people out there.
That's a really great advice. I appreciate that.
I'm glad we got to talk about this a little bit. We did have questions related to transparency, but weren't able to get to them. So absolutely, transparency is part of a good relationship. So Well, thank you all so much for staying on and handling that last question. All right.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks again,
Yes.
everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and